Thank you all for coming. Hi, my name is,
Thank you everyone for coming. Let me just stand so they can see. Um, we got an email, Nature in Israel. We were excited about it, but when I read it, it's like, oh, Haganat Hateva. And I spent my junior year abroad in Israel. Okay, it was in 1979, but still. And I love that this is a fabulous organization. I did a lot of TULE with them. And I just can't wait to hear what Rachel has to say. And we'll start now. Thank you, Rachel, for coming.
and I think that I might, if this doesn't bother the people on the screen, is that okay? Good. So, hi, my name is Rachel. I'm the executive director of an organization called Nature Israel, which some of you might have known as ASPNI. ASPNI is the American Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, because we are the American supporting organization or friends of the Society for the Protection of Nature in Israel, or SPNI. We have way too many names. We decided that all those names were too long and that nobody had heard of us in America. So we're now going by Nature Israel because it says what we are and what we do. But just for a show of hands, who in this room has already heard of SPNI? So folks in here already mostly know about the organization, and you have to tell me if people over there, if Bobby and I know already knows about this. But right. So the deal is I'm on a mission to introduce this organization, Israeli's favorite organization, to the American Jewish community. That's some of what I'm doing here today. And I'm also speaking to some of our supporters. Thank you guys for coming. And of course, the situation is that SPNI has been supported largely by Israelis for 70 years. That's the incredible irony of why it's not more well known in America. It's one of the largest nonprofits in Israel. I think it's the first public nonprofit started in Israel in 1953. I'll tell you tonight about the work and about why it was started. Why is ecology in Israel so important? Why is this organization so important? And we can say it's also very extraordinary to understand that how important this organization is to Israelis. And if you meet anyone Israeli and you say, oh, I went to a talk about Nature Israel, they won't necessarily know what it is. And if you say ASPNI or SPNI, they won't necessarily know what it is. But if you said Chevra Haganat Hateva, they would say, oh, they tell you about it. When they were at the field school with their cousin that worked there, it's really a part of the fabric of Israeli society. And the whole organization, as I said, was started in 1953. Do you remember back when we were draining the swamps? Anybody heard that saying before? In making the desert bloom. We were so proud of it. So it turns out that at the time that we were draining the swamps, there were a few people that said, no, no, don't do that. That is a folly. Why is that a folly? Because it turns out that 500 million birds migrate between Northern Europe and Africa back and forth twice a year, and that this is the second largest bird migration flyway in the world. It's a bottleneck because of the Mediterranean and northern, desertified Africa. So to the east, it's desert and very inhospitable with hunting. There is this very small area that was the wetlands of northern Israel, where all of these birds would stop on their way south, their last rest stop for thousands and thousands and thousands of miles to get something to eat, rest up for their long crossing of the Mediterranean and desert. And of course, coming the other way, they might not have stopped for thousands and thousands of miles when they stopped. So there were people that said, you can't do that, you can't do that. And some ornithologists and some kibbutzniks, and they formed the society, the Chevra, for the protection of nature in Israel. And this organization, as I said, became one of the first nonprofits in Israel. To this day, it's one of the largest. It's if you combine the Sierra Club and the Audubon Society and the Nature Conservancy and the NRDC and all the environmental and shore organizations you can think of in one. And in the end, they couldn't totally stop them draining all the swamps, but they did protect the Hula. The Hula Lake is still there. And I'm going to tell you some about a new initiative which we call rewilding. We're reflooding the swamps, but we don't call them swamps anymore, but I'll get to that later. In any case, what you can see here is a photo from the migration in the area of the Hula. So, skipped ahead. Okay, so why is protecting nature and wildlife in Israel important? Well, it's interesting because I'm going to talk a lot about why we protect nature for the animals. But what we learned after October 7th is that, in fact, we have to protect nature for ourselves. So this is a new initiative some of you might know about that on October 7th, people had to flee from all over the Gaza envelope, the Western Negev, and some people were put up in hotels, luxury hotels, that lived within 4 miles of that border. But people in Sderot, people in Ofakim, places that were overrun with terrorists, were not put up in hotels, and we put them up in our field schools. And so our field schools were full of hundreds of families of evacuees. And we saw right away in October that the families staying in our field schools were doing better than families in the luxury hotels. And I promise you that our accommodations are not that great. Why were they doing better? I look at this photo of this boy and I think it says something. Being in nature, whether it's the view, the connectedness to the earth, the fact that you can see that life continues, that there is something beyond us. I don't know exactly what it was, but it was helping them enormously. Also, the SPNI staff were doing what we always do, which is nature programming with kids and families. And those kids were doing much better. And we said, okay, we took that program, did it for the people in luxury hotels. And we're still doing that program today. It's called Nature Heals. We've helped more than 120,000 Israelis, all different ages. We're working now with returning soldiers as well. And it's really an extraordinary program. And that is to say, I'm going to talk a lot about nature, but it turns out that we don't protect nature as if it's something separate from us. We are a part of nature, and we have to protect nature for ourselves, not just for clean air and water, but because being in nature is, we have found out, is truly intrinsic to our well-being. This is another photo from Nature Heals Ecotherapy. This is one where we take teenagers out for 3 or 4 days with no screens. And we did implement an external evaluation of this program starting in November 2023. And we found 92% of participants said they had reduced anxiety, reduced depression, reduced stress. And the parents told us that it was lasting. So the fact that you could do something that was non-pharmacological, that you didn't have to pay 1 million therapists, there aren't enough therapists and there aren't enough pills in Israel to help all the people, the trauma that's happening. So this is something that SPNI has pivoted to in the last 2 years. And just another reason why it turns out that we protect nature for ourselves. We're also, this is one of our newest programs, is that we're leading the restoration of 60,000 acres of burned and damaged landscapes. SPNI is spearheading the national effort to restore natural spaces damaged during the war, working with regional and local decision makers through the government-funded JDC ELCA framework. To give you an idea, it's so funny, people here haven't heard of us, but who are we? It's SPNI, JDC, and JNF, Kakal, that are all the main organizations working on the nature restoration. But here's another reason that you might not know about. So Israel is a global biodiversity hotspot. Only 3% of the Earth's surface is considered a global biodiversity hotspot, including Israel. You can see from this map. It's at the intersection of 3 continents. And so the animals and the species that live there are really extraordinary. And of course, require a special protection and are endangered because of unsustainable development, climate change. And as I mentioned before, the bird migration fly around, you can see this little map that I think really shows the desert areas, and it makes it really clear that this is a really very narrow space. One little teeny green dot that where the birds can live, and half a billion birds, not half a million. I just came back in November. I saw these pelicans. It was extraordinary. The cranes, the pelicans, the storks. Another reason that we have to do this is because of dense urban environment. Israel is one of the most densely packed and biodiverse countries in the world. So solutions that we develop in Israel are ones that can be, replicated in other countries. And we all know about drip irrigation and all the things that have been created. So we think on the environmental front, especially since Israel is on the front line of climate change. We just had the hottest November in Israel in recorded history. So we're on the front line. So we're the ones hopefully using our ingenuity to help. These are the main areas that we do besides the nature heals: conservation, education, environmental advocacy, and ecotourism. So I was mentioning to you that the money, that Israeli money has been supporting the work of SPNI because they used a brilliant model like the Sierra Club, saying fee for service, ecotourism, and membership like the Sierra Club, and all that income, like a business, paid for the conservation work. So I have some extra slides in here just because they're pretty. So really one of the main things about SPNI, Nature Israel, is about protecting open spaces. Think about how much development there is in Israel, and yet we have national parks. We have sanctuaries set aside. That is the work of SPNI. This map also shows another initiative of SPNI to create greenways so that animals can cross freeways and major arteries and major intersections. It's a highly developed land, and Israel's open spaces are vital. Ecological corridors need to be preserved to support the range of wildlife that lives there. And we also have to keep those densities sustainable. Everyone knows where this is, right? That's Park HaYarkon. It's a huge park in Tel Aviv. It's like a green lung of Tel Aviv. And it's a place that people can get into nature because, as we were just saying, people need nature. So being able to have, even in the big cities, these green spaces is essential for quality of life and mental and physical health. This is a real picture. This is an extraordinary urban nature site called Gazelle Valley that was created by SPNI. There was a patch, like a green patch in Jerusalem, that the city grew up around it, right? The Malka Mall was built, the Holy Land development was built, and you can see there. And there were a few gazelles that were living there. They're indigenous to the area, that got sort of trapped in the middle of the city. And the people that lived in this neighborhood loved this little green patch, even though it wasn't kept very nicely. And there was always flooding in this area. And what happened was there was going to be a development there. And the people in the neighborhood said, don't take away our green patch and don't mess with our gazelles. And SPNI worked with the people in the neighborhood. This is classic SPNI, worked with the municipality, and it's now a Jerusalem municipal park. It is free. It is visited by people from all sectors in Israel: Haredi families, secular families, Arab families. Everybody visits there. Like I said, it's free to get in. You can hang around with gazelles. Maybe you don't get this close to them, but it's remarkably close. They have a beautiful visitor center, and I urge you to visit there. Protecting birds is a huge part of what we do. And this is a scene from the Jerusalem Bird Observatory. It's a hidden gem in Jerusalem. Anybody here been to the Jerusalem Bird Observatory? So it's actually between the Knesset and the Supreme Court. And you're picturing in your head, how can there be a green space between there? But there is. And migrating birds stop there, as well as local birds. There's a fantastic kingfisher that visits the pond there that's something of a local celebrity. And you can go there like these people here, and you can see the ornithologists that band the birds. They trap them gently as professional bird researchers, and they put little bands on them. They test their weight and their general health. It's a fabulous place to visit in Jerusalem. And I encourage you to do so. You can see some people releasing birds there. There are programs there for school-age kids, and they have senior volunteers. It's really a wonderful place to visit for all ages. We talked about this before. It's just another really pretty slide supporting the migration flyway. So a big program is called Startup Nature. This is the video. We want to do it right now. Okay. So Startup Nature is taking the areas, those swamps that we drained, were drained to create agricultural lands. And many of them had fish ponds. But those fish ponds have failed for economic reasons. Chinese sell cheaper fish. They've been abandoned. Some of them have dried up. Some of them are just sludge. They're not nature. And so what SPNI is doing is working with the kibbutzniks, renting the land from them, and rewilding those fish ponds to turn them back into the wetlands that they were before we mucked things up. And it's so interesting because we thought we were going to have to spend a lot of money buying all these indigenous plants and then doing like this landscaping to recreate the nature. But what we found after the first project is that we didn't have to do anything. We just put the water back, cleaned up the toxic, whatever is there, and the life just came rushing back. So not only do the birds love it, the biodiversity comes rushing back. Animals that we haven't seen for years, like river otters that were driven out by development and competing invasive species, are coming back. And the kibbutzniks that had no income now have ecotourism income and money from us renting the land, the fish ponds from them. So it's one of these extraordinary programs where we do something simple, just put some water back, just turn on the tap, and we get birds are happy, biodiversity reintroduction, humans are happy. So it's multiple outputs from one very simple input, which is just putting back the nature the way that it was to begin with. And what is the most extraordinary thing about this is it's a nature-based solution to climate change. It's not some fancy green tech. It turns out that swamps store carbon. Okay, we don't call them swamps anymore. We call them wetlands. And this is a major initiative that's happening the world over. We are one of the early adopter leaders in Israel. You can look it up. It's a global initiative to try and put the water back. We're not worried about malaria, we're worried about climate change. We didn't know, right? I'm not blaming anyone for draining the swamps. I'm just saying, as we learn, we're trying to put things back because nature really has an incredible way of repairing itself. This is an example of one of our other rewilded sites, Kfar This one is a cross border. So the Jordan River and this wetland area is on both sides of the border. Of course, nature knows no borders. So we were working with Jordanian environmentalists to restore both sides of the border. We also protect the seas. It turns out that 50% of Israel's open spaces are marine. The Mediterranean, the Red Sea, the Sea of Galilee. And we are very involved in marine protections. We're creating new marine sanctuaries all the time. We did, in fact, protect the Eilat coral reef, which was being picked to extinction by naive, Israelis who were enjoying the coral reef and then would take some of it home with them. Again, people didn't know. So this is a big victory that SP and I had. I'm going to go over victories a little bit later. But there it is about the coral reefs. And we also are very involved in advocacy. For example, they're trying to build a pipeline. Well, there is a pipeline already that goes from Eilat, the Gulf of Eilat, and brings oil from the places where the oil comes from, right, to the Gulf of Eilat. And then instead of paying money to take a tanker all the way around Africa, come through the Straits of Gibraltar and deliver that oil to the people in Europe that are using it, some Israelis said, oh, you can do a shortcut from Eilat to Port of Ashdod, and we'll just charge you a few $1 million. Well, SP&I says, that's too cheap. Destroying the entire Gulf of Eilat and this extraordinary coral reef, you could never replace. So we are constantly trying to prevent them from increasing the amount of oil that they pump from the Gulf of Eilat up to Ashdod. And this bugs me the most because it's not even oil that we're using, right? We're just giving them a shortcut. It reminds me of like states where they let you dump garbage and toxic things and, just how can you do that in Israel? Like these are gems that should not be sold so cheaply. Education is a huge part of what we do, and we provide nature education K through 12 in all school systems in Israel. Jewish, Arab, religious, secular, Druze, Circassian, everyone learns about the environment and the nature of where they live from SP&I and in our field schools. You can see here, remember I was telling you at the beginning about the field schools. You can see the field schools here where we provided the wartime housing, Har Negev, Hatzava, Eilat, and Engedi. And actually, if you're interested, those field schools in the north, that was all closed military zone. All of those evacuees that have been helping in Nature Heals, those field schools were full of soldiers because as we know that hundreds of thousands of soldiers were called up and they didn't have room for them in all the bases and people were just left stuck outside. So in solidarity, SP&I took in and took care of them, fed and watered, took care of all those soldiers on the dime of SP&I. These field schools, when it's not wartime, of course, places where classes come every year. Every class in Israel has their annual Tiyul Shnati, right? Your annual nature trip. So the older kids go and stay in the field schools. And you can see here just we are strengthening people's understanding and involvement with our natural environment and changing attitudes towards conservation. Actually, the slogan for SP&I is educate, love, protect, because that's the order of things. We educate people about the nature, then they learn to love the nature. And then when you love nature, then you protect it. And in case you hadn't noticed, Israelis love being in nature. I think the fact that SP&I started in 1953, we have become a part of the fabric of Israeli society and truly a part of the culture in Israel. Is anybody here spent much time in Israel? Right? What do people do if they have a holiday besides fly to Italy? If you're in Israel, what do? Get outside. Every Shabbat, what do people do? Get outside. Every park, every inch of it is packed. It's true, you don't have the space to yourself, but it's just amazing how much Israelis love being in nature. And I really attribute this to SP&I that have really helped develop the entire culture in Israel to be one that loves nature. Environmental advocacy, I was telling you about the oil pipeline is an example of that. And actually SP&I has someone sitting in every municipal, city council or town council, there is a representative from SPNI that sits on that council, so that any planning decisions that are made include some awareness and conversation about nature. We're not anti-development, and we're considered actually a very moderate organization that's worked with every government in Israel since 1953. But we do have a presence, and we make sure that people take things into account. So, for example, a big part of the rehabilitation of the Western Negev and Northern Israel, that is our role, is helping to work with the communities that live there to prevent the wrong kind of development. So, for example, the communities of the Western Negev, we assisted them because initially there was a plan by a developer to go into like the area where the Nova site was to develop an amusement park and a disco. Because developers, they're, redevelopment, saw dollar signs, right? Cha-ching. And so at this time, the people from the Western Negev were still grieving while people were off making development plans. So we worked with them, we helped them advocate for themselves with the government to say, hey, this isn't what we want. This isn't why we live here. We live here because of the beautiful nature, because of the spring blooms. Please don't change the nature of the nature of where we live, the character of where we live. And we're now working with them to create the living trail to drive ecotourism, because they said, we don't want just disaster tourism. We want people to come here because we live here, because it's alive. And so we're helping develop a living trail for the people, for ecotourism in the Western. We're very involved in activating the public and conservation efforts. This is called Sea Watch app, renewable energy, and as I said, ecotourism. So we have fostered an appreciation of nature. We built the Israel Trail, which is one of the 20 iconic trails of the world. And when it wasn't wartime, we get 1 million Israelis out on the trails in Israel every year. And of course, visitors like yourselves, we are promoting ecotourism, and we hope that you will visit us and experience Israel's nature up close. Insert your travel photos here. So this isn't everything. At what time is it?
It is 7:30.
Okay, so I'm going to really quickly run through 70 years of impact, okay? I'm going to do it fast because it's too much. So, and it's not even in the slides. I already told you, created the national park system. We don't run them. Everyone confuses us. Israelis always tell us, oh, I go to your parks all the time. I'm like, we actually don't run the national parks. Those are government run. But why are there protected national parks? Because people in 1953 said, hey, if we're building a state, we should have national parks. And we preserved the coral reef in 1953. We preserved the Carmel forest from 62 to 71. We protected the wildflower population. Okay, I have to stop for a minute. So everyone knows, what can we say about Israelis is they don't follow rules, right? But there are 3 rules that Israelis follow. They don't drive on Yom Kippur, right? They sit in their assigned seat at the movie theater. Don't ask me about that one, I don't understand. And they don't pick wildflowers. Why don't they pick wildflowers? Because of an incredible public education campaign that we conducted between 1963 and 1969. And you can go today, and if you go out to see the spring bloom and you go with some Israeli friends, they'll say, don't pick the flowers. Well, they were being picked to extinction. Like, it was really a problem. So if you go and see the blooms today, that's thanks to SPNI. We revived the Hula wetlands. That's what was the main impetus for the creation of the Chevra, of the society. We enabled the Land of Rivers project. Does anyone remember this terrible story of the Maccabi games where the kids fell off the bridge and into the river, and the river was so toxic. That was like our river on fire moment in Israel. So SPNI enabled the Land of Rivers project to clean up the rivers. We saved the Ashdod dunes. We developed the Israel National Trail. We developed the Gazelle Valley. We preserved the Jerusalem forest. We stimulated fishery reform. We introduced rewilding through Startup Nature. And we've helped over 100,000 Israelis through Nature Heals ecotherapy post October 7. We have an exponential impact. If you care about Israel and you care about nature and fighting climate change, we invite you to support Nature Israel. Many of you already do. Thank you so much for coming. Protect the environment locally, sharing innovations globally. Good for Israel, good for the world. Nature Israel. Thank you very much. Here, do people have questions? Yes.
Is Nature Israel the new name?
Yes, it's been, no. So SPNI is still SPNI, and we are the American Supporting Organization. And we used to be called ASPNI. And about 8 years ago, we changed to Nature Israel. It's been a very slow change because this organization, the American Supporting Organization, was founded in 1986. So a lot of people that know us know that, but the amount of people that know us as ASPNI is not enough people. I want the whole American Jewish community to know about us. So the ASPNI doesn't really say who we are. If you didn't know who we are, you wouldn't know who that. Yes.
Questions for you. Two easy ones and then two policy side. Number one is the nature trail open again.
Yes. Yes.
So asset programs that
That's a very good question. I'll start out and say, if you are Israeli and you live in Israel, there's probably 1,000 volunteers that volunteer with SPNI. So for people that live in Israel and are committed, they're volunteering all the time. What SPNI doesn't have is a very developed short-term volunteer program. And I've been pushing for that because everyone is asking me for that. We don't have it right now, and they're disinclined to create fake volunteering. They're very serious about environmental protection. They want people that are trained and that are knowledgeable, and they're not doing some cockamamie, like plant the tree, you know, here you plant the tree, and then that person leaves, and then they take the tree out, and then somebody else comes, let's plant the tree. They don't want to do anything just for the show of it. And they have not been diaspora facing. So I'm interested in developing something, and I'll tell you, on this November trip, we for the first time did a volunteer project with another. There's so many projects of SPNI. I couldn't include them all in. I would just go on and on and on, but we have another one called Army for the Protection of Nature, and they have a project that we volunteered on, and I talked to the director of that department, and we might be able to in the future, I don't know, look like if we can find things that are in places that are accessible to the public and that you're not in the military. But that is a very long answer to say, no, we don't have, but I really, really want us to.
questions for policy. We were struck in our recent visit there, last time you were there. Israel is vertical. I mean, if you look at Canar, for example, the skyscrapers are not only on the west side, but the way on the east side. Is there a wheat belt sort of thing where Israel is essentially saying this needs to be bordered by green? And obviously there's government policies, but are you involved in those sorts of things?
Yes, absolutely. That's what I was saying. Every development in Israel involves representation from SPNI. We are always trying to include green spaces. We're not, the reason that everything is so vertical, this is better than spread out. Also, we're not wanting to have like solar fields, by the way. So we're saying put the solar panels on the tops of all the buildings. Don't take up the animal spaces with your solar panels. So we're very, very involved.
That desalinated water is going inherent,
Yes.
is something that we folks are involved in as part of the rewiring of that area.
I don't think that we are specifically involved in that project per se. What I would say is the policy and the development of using the desalinated water and getting water to the Canar and getting more water into the Jordan. We are very much involved in bringing in water, but in terms of like that specific, very often we're not the ones doing the work, except for the rewilding. We are very involved in policy and advocacy to make sure that whatever the work that's being done, that it's advantageous and natural. And are there any, but maybe you can ask also if Bobby or Michael or anyone online has questions too. Yeah. And does anybody else have any questions? Well, yes. Animals in Israel are indigenous to Israel. There is one fantastic story of sort of important, which is a story about the fallow deer that became extinct. They were indigenous to Israel. They became extinct, and I can't tell the whole story. It's really like it should be a movie. I think we have it in some newsletter that there was somebody who found fallow deer in Iran, and he wanted to reintroduce these animals that were indigenous to Israel, but had gone extinct. And there were a few deer, and then it was the Iranian revolution, and there was like secret agents, and it's just fantastic story. And they did end up smuggling these fallow deer back into Israel and reintroduce the species. But that's just sort of a exciting action movie story. The other animals that are there are all indigenous to there. There is some interesting.
I put up that.
Oh, thank you. And maybe we can find a link to that. I'll have to, if people are interested in that story, I can get it I want to get it from our communications director. She wrote a really beautiful version of that story. But there are a lot of animals that have lived in Israel since the time of the Bible. A lot of them are extinct. There are no longer panthers. You know, they're big cats. The biggest cat now in Israel is called a jungle cat. There's some animals that have gone extinct, and we're doing our best to try and save the ones that are endangered now, like gazelles that we're reintroducing in Gazelle Valley. They're actually breeding there, and then there's too many for that little spot, and so we're trapping them, releasing them into the Judean hills and other areas where there are other herds of gazelles. And like I said, we're trying to bring back otters and a few other species that are endangered, like griffon vultures. There is a zoo in Israel, and there's one you might like to see called the Biblical Zoo that has all the animals that were in Israel since the time of the Bible. Very nice.
Good.
No, that's in Jerusalem.
I have a question. Bird patients. Please. I moved in the Dead Sea. The last time I was in the Dead Sea, I looked at the street feature. And you're talking about so we have anything Dead Sea. Can you give us an update on what's happening?
So the Dead Sea is done. It's very, has to do with the Jordan, which is just a trickle. We're very involved with trying to get some water into the Jordan River in natural ways. These med dead and all these plans weren't what we're interested in. What I can say to you is, again, while we're not necessarily doing each individual project, I always think of SPNI as sort of like the mothership. So there's lots of smaller environmental organizations and scientists that we support and work with. So I know that there are people that are working very specifically on the Dead Sea issue, and we are supporting them. And yeah, it's pretty sad. I mean, if you haven't been there for years, the hotel you stayed at is abandoned, and then there's like a kilometer of beach before you get to the water. So it's serious, and we are
Super sad.
yeah, and we are definitely, yes. In fact, our March trip, we plan to try and do this Dead Sea boat ride in 2026. We do, as I said, we lead nature tours when it's not wartime. So we'll be visiting the Dead Sea area, talk about that with experts in March 2026. Are there any online questions? No.
Can you say a little more about that trip?
Yes. And actually, I want to say something about your trip too. Thank you for reminding me. So something we want to encourage, we just haven't been diaspora facing, is that we want to tell you that your congregational trips, your community trips can visit SPNI sites. You could go with your congregation to the Jerusalem Bird Observatory or to the Gazelle Valley. So I have a flyer where you can talk to me about it, whether you want an hour or 2 hours, a full day. We can set up any trip with some very informative, interesting and fun nature visit that I think spices up and makes every trip more fun. When you ask people what their favorite part of any Israel trip is, it's always some nature part. So we say, put the nature into your trip. And our trip, actually, there's a few different kinds of trips. If you're a birder, there is a Lot Bird Festival in March and the Hula Bird Festival in November, where you spend a lot of time in a few very specific places trying to see as many birds as possible, right? You know, the birding people and counting birds and everything. But we do trips that are for a more general audience. I just led a trip in November. In the fall, we do a trip focused on the north and visit the hula and do the pre-dawn visit. You have to get up very, very early in the morning to be able to be there when the sun rises and tens of thousands of cranes take off at the same time. It is very wow. And in the spring, we always do the southern area, so it won't be too hot. Also, the spring bloom is a very narrow window and it's fantastically beautiful. So this March trip will be March 15th to the 20th, 5 days, and we will be visiting some desert areas, Mitzvah Ramon, the Ramon crater. We'll go to En Gedi, Dead Sea, and also we'll visit one of the rewilding sites, and we'll also probably pay a visit. I would like us to the memorial sites in the Western Negev. So that's a really good question. So the long trips, the like 5-day trips where we book hotels and everything, we work with an Israeli tour operator. Normally, I would have a link for that trip for you already, but we actually had to switch Israeli tour operators because our tour operator didn't really survive the past 2 years. So we're going to do a spontaneous trip. We're going to be posting registration hopefully by December 9th, 8th. I don't know, hopefully very soon. We're looking for spontaneity, but we have a lot of people that have wanted to go. So we said, okay, we'll go for it. And you can register online for that and you pay directly to the tour operator. But if you're in Israel already, go to our website and you look under Israel guided tours and you will find a list of day trips that you can do all the time. We refresh those every couple of months, and you can go with an English speaking guide, do SPNI English speaking trips. And if you have Hebrew, you go to the Hebrew website and you just have hundreds of things. That's what they do, right? And so there's just a lot to do every day. Great. Thank you for coming. I hope to see you in Israel. Thank you guys online for coming too.